We would like to welcome now the director, co-director, Daniel Junge, the producer, Wellington Love, and from the film Beatitude, Zachary Jones, who of course is a close friend and associate of the late Reverend Carl Bean. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having us.
Daniel, there's a really interesting backstory to how this film came about. You were working on a project about social action and protest related documentaries. And initially, we're sort of looking, as I understand it, at Lady Gaga and her song, I Was Born This Way. And that led you to really discover Carl Bean. Is that right?
Exactly. This series I was developing had an episode on sex and gender. And of course, I immediately thought of Lady Gaga and her song, Born This Way. But in researching that song, I found Carl's song. I found out that her song was indeed honoring a previous song and the man who sang it, Archbishop Carl Bean. So, like so many series, that did not happen. And yet that story stuck in my craw. And I looked deeper into it and realized that he was just down the street. His church was just down the street from me in LA. And, called up the church and had a meeting with him several days later. And we were off and running within a month making this film. That was a mere 7 years ago, I might mention. This has been a labor of love. And I am a long-time mentee of Sam Pollard, as many filmmakers are, and he have worked with him on an earlier HBO film, and so I was fortunate for have him come on as co-director on the film.
Mm-hmm. Wellington, as I understand it, the original idea was to make this a short, and then it expanded into a feature at some point. Can you talk about that evolution?
Yeah, I mean, well, first I'll start with I came onto the project 4.5 years ago when the intention was to make a 40-minute short film. And after watching the reels, the initial sort of hero interview that Daniel created with the Archbishop, and just seeing his story, seeing him talk about his life, all the things he accomplished, from both the trauma to the glory of his life. Some months into my joining the team, we all decided, there's just no way that we're going to be able to capture this man's story, to do his story justice. We have one opportunity to get this right. And we knew that the only way to get it right was to expand it into a feature. And thus we have the current version of I Was Born This Way.
Beatitude, when did you first meet Archbishop Carl Bean, and what were your first impressions?
Well, I met him in the early 80s. He was pastoring a small church, very small congregation. And they had just started basically to gather and to offer a religious tradition within the Black community to folks who were LGBTQIA members of community, and really had morphed into kind of being fed up with being told that their life was anti-God, or they were going to hell, and so forth, so on. So meeting him for the first time through a friend of mine who said, hey, I need you to come go with me to this church. And I was like, oh, okay. And he was dynamic. He was as dynamic in person as he was on that film. And just really connecting with his energy and his passion for community and building community.
Yeah, and indeed, we see that that's so remarkable, the way that he brought people together. And Daniel, you have some rather remarkable people who were in the film, are well known to, well, really everyone around the world in many cases, such as Lady Gaga, of course, and Questlove, who is an Oscar winner and one of, if not the single most knowledgeable person about music that there is. Jamie Lee Curtis is an executive producer. Billy Porter, of course. When you talk about assembling this rather remarkable group of people to be part of the film.
Yeah. Well, in the words of Orson Welles, with great difficulty. But that's when you make a film for 7 years, you have time to add pieces. And Matt, when you first said, I didn't know this story, that's the reaction of most folks. Archbishop Carl Bean, for all his great work, was not a well-known man. And so by adding these celebrity elements, we hope that it will help draw people into the film. I mean, of course, we all know there's plenty of celebrity docs right now. But for us, it was I think documentary is best when you're on a discovery, a process of discovery, and learning about someone that you'd never, ever known did such great work. But using celebrity helps. And when celebrities and all these celebrities, they came piece by piece, and a lot, and we got Gaga through Questlove, we got Jamie through another friend of mine. They came piece by piece, but when each of them came, the interesting thing is they felt like they were there in service of the film. They all felt like they owed a debt of gratitude to this man, and came, especially Lady Gaga, one of the biggest stars in the world, and came with such humility and such deference to Carl that that blew me away. So I do hope that these names attract people to the film, but I hope they walk away thinking not so much about them, but about the Archbishop.
Yeah. One of the most remarkable things, I think, really, of looking at really American culture and music history, is the fact that this re-recorded version that Carl Bean did of I Was Born This Way came out from Motown. I mean, Wellington, I don't think anyone would think of Motown in that way, of having released this extraordinary gay anthem, but that in and of itself is a remarkable aspect of this story.
Yeah, well, I actually, Iris Gordy speaks to that in the film, right? She talks about, this direction that Motown decided to go in, and they were obviously sort of, seizing a moment in the culture with disco and, what was happening in terms of sort of, liberation. And, I often sort of think about, that Carl was the embodiment of I Was Born This Way. And so he was the perfect person for Motown to be the vehicle for Motown sort of venture into, this realm of very out loud, proud music that has now become, a classic, an anthem, that is still played today, in clubs.
Yeah, and Wellington, I think you've written about this or talked about it, that you wish that you had been aware of this song,
Yeah.
as you were growing up, because it
Yeah.
is powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in 1977, I was 12 years old, and my cousins, we would get together on the weekends, and we would play these, 45-inch singles, right? And I just think about, wow, what would it have been like if in that, collection of scratchy 45s, that there had been I Was Born This Way, like it would have, God, what would it have done, for my life as a 12-year-old, knowing that there was a man out there singing about, being openly gay, and he was black and proud. So, yeah, I think it's a testament to, well, to Motown, one, for taking the chance, and for Carl for being so brave to do it.
Yeah, it is brave. And again, the lyrics are so, I mean, I don't know if stark is the word, but but leave no question as to the point of view of the song, which is part of its power and importance. And Beatitude, I was curious about, again, about Carl, if I may call him Carl. We hear the beautiful voice, just a really remarkable voice, but perhaps more importantly, or part of that essence of him, was a joyousness. And I think if anyone would want to see the work of the light of God, if you'd like to put it that way, wow, they can see it shining through him.
Certainly, he had vision. There was no doubt about him having vision for a world that was radically inclusive. Him having vision for people within his community accessing. First of all, so much of it had to do with healthcare and had to do with his, keeping people healthy and addressing this issue that had kind of landed in his lap, so to speak, in the midst of him cultivating this very, wonderful career with Motown, who were basically throwing hits at him and saying, "Listen, you've got the voice that can represent our company, that can represent who we are, and get on board." And yet he has to grapple with a larger calling beyond even his art, which is in terms of an artist, that's a huge issue. So to um, honor this man who made the level of sacrifices that he did, I think it's pretty remarkable. We owe such debt into the producers and the directors and the whole team.
Yeah, that's really says so much about him. I mean, he had the golden, the brass ring, the golden ring, whatever kind of ring it is, right there held in front of him, and he chose this higher calling. Um, I was curious. I wanted to ask you, Daniel, about some of the filmmaking aspects. I think the animation is quite beautiful. I guess it's a rotoscope style, but can you talk about using that and incorporating that into the film?
Sure. Well, Sam and I were presented with the same dilemma that so many of us filmmakers, when we're doing a historical piece, are presented with, and that is that you get a lot of great stories, sometimes with no archival whatsoever. And of course, what little archive we found of Carl is on the screen. We were really happy to find that. But all these lost chapters of his life, which were so important, we knew that we were looking at the necessity of recreation. And Sam and I have both done recreations. I think Sam did really incredible recreations for MLK FBI. And we both agree that we wanted to do something interesting and innovative, and also represent the color, the kind of the superhero that Carl was. And that's how we both love Richard Linklater's Scanner Darkly, Waking Life, Apollo 10 and a half, and emulated that style. In fact, one of the advisors on the film was Linklater's animator. The problem is that that's a very involved process. It requires us casting actors who look like different ages of Carl, shooting them on stage, whether it's green screen or just a stage, and then hand painting, of course using a computer, but hand painting every fourth frame for the lead characters, and then creating digital backgrounds that match them. It's a very involved process. And again, part of the reason this film took so long to make, but hopefully it adds that kind of colorful comic book hero identity that we wanted to imbue Carl with.
And that kind of leads me to another question I had. It obviously goes together, and Wellington, maybe you can speak to that. But clearly, you have to write a script for this. And again, that's a little bit unusual for a documentary. But in those scenes that are animated, you're using some of the things that Carl said, but creating other dialogue. This is a really interesting facet to the documentary that really brings us back to those moments.
Yeah, I think also just picking a little bit up on what Dan was saying, we wanted to do because Carl has this multifaceted life that spanned so many, that spanned music, that spanned his spiritual work, his AIDS activism, and then he also had this, very sort of formative childhood, and the animation serves to sort of give a kind of poetic, lyrical, illustrative retelling of those events versus the typical recreations. And I think it just adds this other layer, this narrative layer, which I think is what you're getting at, with the idea of this scripted layer to the film, which in some ways makes it a kind of a blend, a fusion of the two, of both narrative and documentary. And I think it works. I hope it works really well, in serving to tell Carl's story.
And Beatitude, we hear about your work with the church that the Archbishop founded. It's a really interesting moment where Maxine Waters, a representative from the Los Angeles area, says the Black community has changed because of Carl Bean. And I wondered, I guess the question would be if you agree with that, and if so, in what ways you feel that he did change the Black community.
Yeah, I do agree with it. Each time I hear her say it in the films, I'm struck by the statement because my mind then goes back to having been a member of the mainstream Black church impact and influence in Los Angeles, it was quite an interesting experience to be considered a kind of an outsider until the issue would hit some of the more prominent Black church community, and they wanted to deal with the HIV/AIDS issue after business hours, or there would be private meetings with Carl and I, and a particular prominent minister who came down with HIV or AIDS. And so we honored their privacy. We honored, what ways we could to address and treat and make everybody okay. And so we recognized that the educational level around the disease needed to happen. So his advocacy work was not only for the LGBTQIA community, but it expanded beyond that because we knew, whether we knew, in private or not, that there were other people who were dealing with this disease, and they were dealing with it on the so-called down low.
Exactly. And for Daniel and Wellington, what's so beautiful about Archbishop Carl Dean is that he was such a unifying figure, and it was unifying all of us around the message of love. We're living in very disunited, very divided times, needless to say. And boy, his message in that sense could not be more important, although, boy, it's awfully hard to get it out there now. But maybe you could comment about the meaning of his life, the meaning of his message, particularly in the times we're living in 2025.
Yeah, Matt. I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, God is love. Love is for everyone. We need that so much right now. And you're right. It's hard to fight, the tides that are against us. And I think one of the things that, in addition to this film sort of arriving at this moment, we had no idea when we, especially Dan, who started this, 7 years ago, that the film would arrive at this time, when, as you said, this message is so needed. And I also think that there's something else about it, which is, in addition to the difficulty in getting messages out about bringing people together, about finding commonality, about sort of appreciating love, is also the preservation, the documentation of history, right? History is being erased. And I think again, with this film, maybe this film does just a little bit, to bring back this idea about, thinking about other people, loving other people, and also remembering our history makers, like remembering the people who saved lives. I mean, the Archbishop, he saved people's lives, yeah, and that's something that we should know about. So, as I said, I hope the film just does a little bit to sort of put back just a little piece of what's being taken away, because it's it's a fight, and I think that this film is a beautiful way to resist, to push back, to fight.
Yeah, and for those that he couldn't save, in the case of, say, the relatively early days of the AIDS epidemic, he gave something beautiful. He shared something beautiful of a passage with dignity. And we know that so many who died of AIDS were not afforded that, were cut off from their families in so many cases. And he gave them something beautiful in his ministry and going to hospitals. And we see him, that's why he became a minister. I've got to get to the hospital after hours. And that was the entree. Daniel, maybe you could sum up what you put it this way, of what you feel about this really extraordinary human being that was Carl Bean.
Well, I'm a straight white cis guy from the suburbs of Wyoming, And so, but yet his message resonates with me. And the end, we open up the aperture to talk about the times we're living on, and that's where I feel like it's speaking to everyone. But I really love to throw this to Beatitude, because he's the one carrying the torch now. He's the one carrying that message. Oh, of course, there's many, but he's at the front of that. He's the tip of the spear.
Certainly, to have lived in the shadows of this very impactful individual, to attempt to fill his shoes with his organizations that he left behind, to experience the investment of his followers and how they invested their commitment to honoring his message and his legacy it's overwhelming at times. It's all striking because we started in a very small, unassuming spot in Los Angeles, really reaching out to those who we clubbed with, who we had boyfriends and girlfriends with, growing up, and then it morphed. It morphed into this social justice movement that now, as Daniel just stated, it's broader than one particular community. It has all of the ingredients in it to unify and to expand community, the very antithesis of so much of what we are experiencing today. And so we're excited about that honor and that role in being able to have something that's relative and needed. And these guys have produced, I don't think really they grasp the brevity of what they've done in capturing that history. But we see in every showing these incredible testaments that people share in meeting him for the first time, or even being reminded of the impact of this individual to the point they're saying in shock, I can't understand why I didn't know this man existed.
Yeah.
So that's
Well, now they
that's an
will.
incredible experience.
Well, it's a beautiful tribute to him and gives us much to appreciate about history and much to think about how we go about our own lives and what we can do to create unity, to create fellowship, to borrow the name of the church, Unity Fellowship Church. We're so pleased to have been joined by Wellington Love, the producer of I Was Born This Way, Daniel Junge, who's the co-director with Sam Pollard of the film, and with Beatitude Bishop Zachary Jones. Thank you so much for being with us on For the Love of Docs.
Our pleasure.
Thank you for showcasing the film, Matt. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely.